Well, my name is Cal Breed. I'm an artist and designer in North Alabama. I work primarily in glass. And my plan was just to kind of tell you my story of how I make things, how I've developed a language, and do that through teaching you through my process of work and how I've pursued how to bridge the gap between idea and object. For a brief history, when I found glass, it was like I'd found my pen and ink. It was like I'd found a material that I could speak with. Not necessarily that good with my voice, but with glass it seemed more natural. And even with the challenging qualities of glass, it just seemed like that was the material I needed to work with. And I actually began here in Birmingham. I met Cam Langley. He was an artist who very generously shared his studio. He shared his space with me. He shared his knowledge and his passion. And it was with working with him that I really learned about the importance of having a mentor. So after working with Cam for about 6 months, I continued to search across the states and find people with any information that would give me knowledge so that I could build my language. And at that point, I was young, gathering knowledge, gathering basic vocabulary, but I needed a place to make things. I needed a place to make mistakes. So I built Orbix Hot Glass in Fort Payne, Alabama. My wife and I, in 2002, opened up the shop, and I use it as a space to develop as an artist. I honestly want to be a sculptor, but I do a lot of design work so that I can refine my language. I've never found anything quite as effective as multiples for refining my eye and my craftsmanship, my hand skills. So with glass, it's an extremely difficult material, and so this time in this space, day in and day out, was very important to develop a skill that I could be able to eventually, hopefully, voice the poetry that I wanted to speak in sculpture. So just the process of repetition, I just found very important. So along the way in the studio, there's things that have happened to help me develop my language as well. But being immersed in what inspires me, being on Lookout Mountain and Little River Canyon, many times I'm inspired by the space around me. I'm inspired by the fauna around me. This is actually blowing glass into blackberry bushes and briars and pine needles, and these pieces were developed from that process. Even some of these were dug a hole into the ground, and materials from the surrounding area were embossed into the material. So these are actually the rocks, but I've done sticks and stones. I've done some really large trees as well. Also along the way, I've responded with, there's accidental genius. You know, there's moments when you're in the studio and you have a particular idea. I'm always asked, do I know what I'm going to make? And I do, but there's many times when I make something way more beautiful than I intended. And I think that's a way that I've responded to grow as an artist. This piece in particular would be one. I love to play with fire. I think it's important to dive in, to be immersed in the smoke, be engulfed in the flames, and not be fearful of getting burned. It's just my process. It's my way of finding my language. I'm actually making the bark for a piece I'll show later, and also in the process of making anything. You guys are makers, designers. You know that there's failures, and there's a need to look and find the beauty in what's lost. I mean, this piece was swerving before it went in the ditch, but it was good that I lost it. But I know that no doubt the next piece is going to be better. I mean, it's not going to be on the floor. With working with glass as a material and the scale that I like to work, I've had to develop a really strong team, and over time, if you work with people, you know that takes a long time. And this is my team, and it's my opportunity to return that mentorship that I learned from Cam. So here we are more to date. This is finally, 20 years later, I had an opportunity to show some work at the Huntsville Museum of Art. I had 17 sculptures. This piece is called Silver and Gold. I'm a beekeeper as well. And this whole group of work was called Pelts and Lyrics, and it was based off of the body and the passions that we hold within us. So that was like a beehive. This is a large blown walnut. It was made in clay. A mold was made and a wax, and then another mold. The mold was brought to 1200 degrees and glasses blown into the mold and impressed, and then cooled down, ground, and polished and glued together. It was made in two separate halves. This piece was called Introspection. It was made at Pecha Glass School, which is in Seattle. It's a special place. It was a great place. It was an opportunity for me to be a mentor as well. I was teaching a beginning class, but it was all about looking inside and inward. And anyhow, Pecha, if you're ever interested in glass, Pecha Glass School would be the place to go. This piece was also from the show, and it's called Muir Song, Skin and Wind, and it was a piece based on John Muir. These are glass trees. These were also formed by blowing glass into fauna from the property around the house. And this piece was called Prayer. It's a bird on a tuning fork and on an oar and on a wishbone. And anyhow, this whole process of this sculptural show, every piece was very different, very wide range, because that's the way I am. Everyone wanted it to be a body of work that was very specific, one different color, and I just don't work that way. I do that with pictures. This is how I speak. So this piece was made of 14 sheets of plate glass that were glued together, and the tree rings were actually fired on enamels, the first time I'd ever done that. And the piece where the fire was around my head, I was actually creating that bark that's at the base. And this is my final image. It was just to what's to look ahead, as far as this is a piece about Galileo and his clarity of thinking beyond what other people are thinking, and always a student. That's just the way I ended. Always a student, always learning.